Folks, Duane Buck is fighting his case at the U.S. Supreme Court. He is a Texas inmate. He's trying to stay alive after shocking testimony was used to sway jurors in Houston to sentence him to death. Here's what happened. Duane Buck was sentenced to die for the 1995 shooting deaths of his ex-girlfriend and her friend. He also shot his stepsister, but she survived. Buck's appeal centers on the statements from the prosecution's psychologist. The expert testified Buck was more likely to be dangerous in the future because he's black. But yesterday, majority of the justices, as they argued this case before the Supreme Court, expressed concern that Buck's own defense lawyer, not the prosecutors, introduced the racially charged testimony during his trial. A decision is expected sometime before June, or actually in late June. Joining me now in New York City, Angel Harris, the assistant counsel for the NAACP Legal Defense and Educational Fund. Of course, our panel, Kristen Clark, Gianno Caldwell, Tiffany Lofton as well. Angel, this is strange. So the defense lawyer played this role? The defense lawyer?
That's correct. So they hired a psychologist who said that Mr. Buck, due to the fact that he was black, was more likely to commit a violent crime in the future. And the reason why this is significant is because in order to have a death sentence in Texas, you have to prove future dangerousness. And with that testimony, it not only introduced racial bias, but it also validated the racialized fear of violence. As we know, a lot of people view black men and black people in general through a lens of violence. And having an expert validate that racial claim is very dangerous and problematic. And the court emphasized that yesterday. Everyone in the courtroom recognized the fact that this was a problem and that it was highly prejudicial for Mr. Buck. And for over a century, the United States Supreme Court has emphasized that racial bias, when introduced into a criminal case, is unacceptable and prejudicial to a defendant. And Mr. Buck is just asking for the opportunity to have a non-bias sentencing hearing. And you know, it's time to really eradicate racial bias in the criminal justice system, and the court has an opportunity to do that in Mr. Buck's case.
Christian, you were in the courtroom yesterday, described listening to the justices question the attorneys on both sides.
This is probably one of the most important civil rights cases to go before the court this term. We have a life that hangs in the balance here. As I sat there in the courtroom listening to the justices, I think all of them were deeply concerned about, you know, Justice Alito, one of the most conservative justices on the court, said this is truly bizarre that you would have an expert say that because this man is black, he's likely to pose a danger to the public in the future. Justice Roberts asked the attorney from the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, Christina Sworn, several times, well, how do you want to win this case? So I think the court is poised to do the right thing. The big takeaway from this case is that race continues to infect every level of our criminal justice system. We're not just talking about street level stops, we're talking about all the way down to what happens when sentencing decisions are made about whether you impose life or death. And here you had racialized evidence presented to a jury that, as Ms. Sworns put it, put the thumb on death's scale and basically, pushed this jury to decide that they could not exercise mercy here and give this man life and look at the individual facts about him. But merely because he is a black man, he must pose a danger to society, leaving them no choice than to issue the death penalty here. Hugely important case. Did the only African American on the Supreme Court say anything? He was silent as usual. And I'll tell you the other unusual thing, that ninth seat on the court, they used to have a black drape over it. It's now gone, right? So a life and death case sits with 8 justices. And so the idea that we might end up with a 4-4 tie here and that a man could be executed based on the racist testimony that was placed before this jury that decided to impose death puts me in a very uncomfortable position.
Angel, if the court rules in favor of Buck, is a new trial ordered or do they simply vacate the death penalty?
So one of the things that could happen is Mr. Buck would have a new sentencing hearing. So the entire trial wouldn't be done over. It would just be the sentencing hearing. So there would be an opportunity to present information on Mr. Buck's behalf, just related solely to the sentence.
So he was convicted of the crimes, but the issue here was in the sentencing phase.
Yes, that's correct. So what's at issue now is Mr. Buck's death sentence. So that's what would be redone if he is given relief in this case. It would deal specifically with just the sentencing. All
right then, Angel, we certainly appreciate it. Thank you so very much for joining us on News One Now.
Kickstart your day at 7 and get the news you need from the perspective you want. News One Now with Roland Martin, every weekday morning at 7 on TV One.